Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always by the man voted most likely to eat a sandwich, Jason Johnston Yellen.
You're so right.
Right?
You are so right. I just thought this about myself on Saturday. I thought, I'm having a sandwich right now. Uh-huh. This was, lunchtime. And I thought to myself, I could have a sandwich for dinner.
Yeah.
And I didn't. But then I got to Sunday and I thought, I could really go for a sandwich.
Sunday, sandwich Sunday. Right? Was it one of those days? Just another sandwich Sunday. That's my fun day. What else do we have? Every day is like sandwich Sunday.
All I can think of is mayonnaise, and I can't get anything to rhyme with mayonnaise.
No, you don't do that. No one uses mayonnaise on a sandwich, I don't think.
So personally, I don't. I'm not a mayonnaise person, but I know there are people who absolutely love mayonnaise on a sandwich. Absolutely love it. I used to.
Back in grammar school, my favorite sandwich was roast beef and mayonnaise, which sounds like a horrific combination.
For a host of reasons.
But I loved it. Like, I couldn't get enough. Like, lay it on.
Okay.
Lay it on me, baby.
Oh, yeah. No. For us, and this is for all of our overseas listeners here, salad cream. Heinz salad cream. Oh.
Is that like Miracle Whip?
No. People are going to throw their sandwiches in the air when I say this. Salad cream, to me, is a cousin of ranch more than it's got anything to do with Miracle Whip. Miracle Whip is all kinds of wrong. Salad cream is much more of an approachable condiment than Miracle Whip.
So isn't ranch basically like mayonnaise with tartar sauce, or is that Thousand Island?
No, ranch is buttermilk based.
Okay.
And then Thousand Island is essentially what ketchup meets.
No, that's French dressing.
Maybe
ketchup and mayonnaise is French dressing.
What's Russian dressing then?
I don't talk about the Russians these days, Jason. So I don't.
No, right? How do we get from sandwiches to the war in Ukraine in 3 minutes? Like, wow!
Oh, gosh, I'm putting a sanction on this conversation right now, Jason.
So let me. So you have thought about me with sandwiches, and you've got me correct. I'm all in on sandwiches. But I was reading a book a week ago. The book is called Braiding Sweetgrass. It's written by a Native American woman who's also a PhD ecologist. Absolutely fascinating book. And as I'm reading through it, I encountered the word windrow.
Windrow. Can you spell it?
So take the word window and put an R in it.
Windrow.
Right. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, I haven't encountered a typo anywhere in this book. Obviously, when I see typos, I think of Joshua Hatton.
Okay.
And I think I haven't seen any typos along the way here. And now windrow has shown up when it must be window. My point being, I'd never encountered the word windrow in my life, in my cream puff, as we say in Scotland. And so I did what anybody does reading on an iPad device nowadays. I pressed my finger to windrow to get a definition of it. You're going to like this. So, spoiler, it wasn't a typo. It's a real, live, kicking, breathing word.
Okay.
Windrow. So, when you're driving in your car and you drive by some fields and the farmer has recently cut, whether it be wheat or straw or hay or what it happens to be, barley, gosh. And then as you're going, you see the rows of the cut grass just running through the field. Those lines are windrows.
That's interesting. So is it...
I found it was a windrow to a whole new world.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh. That was so painful. Oh, that was like the worst buildup to the worst punchline. It would have been better if you just said and I thought they were going to say Windrow Wilson ex-president, which is Woodrow. Yeah, anyway. Wow. Painful. Listeners.
I didn't even plan that pun. That just came to me as I was talking to you now.
On behalf of everyone here at J&J Spirits headquarters, I apologize for my partner's terrible, terrible pun.
But isn't that great, right? So think of us in whiskey, think of barley, think of the harvest, right? Think of these rows of cut grass species, and it's a windrow.
Do you think Stairway to Heaven would be a different song if there was a bustle in your windrow instead of your hedgerow?
It would, because to me it would speak to the manipulation of man and the environment as opposed to the naturally forming hedgerow.
Okay.
Just, you asked me a question, I gave you an answer.
You know what I like about today's guest, Jason?
Yeah. Well, tons of things. Tons and tons and tons of things.
But
what are you thinking of in particular?
Well, the actual person aside, I always like it when which I never want to say, right? But I like it. I always like it when we take just a little bit of a detour from whiskey, when we're able to have conversations around subjects that may circle whiskey, maybe whiskey adjacent. And I would argue that drawn art is not necessarily whiskey adjacent. However, drawn art in the case of Single Cask Nation is essential to who we are and what we've become. And you know, we've said it in our interview with our dear friend Mo McAuliffe, who I've known for 20 some odd years and love her dearly, that we don't think we would be where we are if it weren't for her eye and her art and her hands. And that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you pitch it the way you're currently pitching it, because I think as you look at any bottle of whiskey, it must by law have a label. And that label, I would say 9.5 times out of 10, has been in front of an artist of some description, a designer of some description.
Yes.
I think labels are so ubiquitous, we tend to not see them unless they really stand out. But you and I know with this company, we've spent a decade plus looking over tons and tons and tons of labels, even simply looking at government health warnings or font choices or positioning of 750 ml, 700 ml, 70 cl, right? Like, we've really looked at labels in minute detail. But I think what Mo has delivered in the Woodcut series, the Whisky Jewbilee bottlings, and of course the 24-year-old unnamed bourbon, is she's taken the label from the background and really brought it to the foreground.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. You know, there's no label that has gone onto a bottle that hasn't had some sort of a designer's eye saying, this is how we're going to lay it out, right? Like I'm
going to stick to 99.5%.
But I like the way that you say it, where she's gone the flip way, right? And I'm not trying to say anything bad.
I feel like this is this is every episode. Like, I'm not trying to say anything bad. I don't want this to come across the wrong way. I don't want to offend anybody. And then it all leads to but, and then we get your statement.
My point is, if you take a classic series like, Gordon MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice, it's always been a very plain, approachable label where you could read the details, open the bottle, and drink. And the purpose of it was not to gawk at the label, but to gawk at and admire the delicious whiskey in the bottle, right? And so the artistic aspect of it was not always evident to the consumer, maybe evident to the designer, and maybe that was the goal. Like, I'm not here to like stand out. I'm here to say what the whiskey is and let people enjoy the whiskey, right? Where in the case of Mo's art, it was the combination of the two. It was, we're bottling great whiskey, but we want some sort of artwork to pop, to capture one's eye, to capture one's imagination. And that's where you don't always see that happening. Now, granted, more and more you are seeing it. I remember 10 plus years ago, you had David Stirk with his Bird series, right? Which I thought was fantastic.
I love that series.
And the Tony Cole series that he did. And, and you see it more and more with the whiskey sponge labels, of course, with the boutique labels and such. And so we're seeing it more and more. And so while at one point art has been a necessity to produce labels, it's now become a bit more whiskey adjacent with how people are like some people, I think, are making purchasing decisions based on a label, kind of like how, we would purchase a book. I've heard about that author, but the cover looks really cool, or a wine. I've heard about this wine. Man, that label looks cool, and you pick it up.
I think beer. Like, you and I have had these conversations about beers where for years and years we've looked at beer labels where they were allowed to do things we would never have been allowed to do with a whiskey label. And I do think some of those beer designs have started to open the door for more expressive whiskey designs. And I appreciate that. I didn't always appreciate that, but I'm appreciating that more and more now. A quick question for you, just on labels, because I'm starting to see these popping up in stores. What do you think of some of the new Diageo labels?
I'll give you my honest opinion, Jason. I like them. I think they're attractive, but when it comes to the Diageo labels, like, that's when I want them to pull back a little bit. There's something so classic about the Diageo labels and the classic distillery labels. And while I enjoy the artistry of it, I kind of want it to stay classic. Like, please don't update it. Like, stay classic. And so there's my honest answer.
It's a rock and a hard place, isn't it? Where you're trying to innovate and present packaging that will appeal to a new audience at the same time as not losing or alienating the don't really want to say older audience, but
I don't know what you're talking
audience. About. And I've done it through this whole conversation. I've just been spinning my head around my office here, looking at different bottles with different labels, and I'm looking at my Lagavulin shelf and just thinking, gosh, it's so iconic. It's so wonderfully iconic. And change is scary, Joshua. It's really scary.
It is scary. And, I mean, that is a thing. When you take away, back to the Lagavulin, it is such an iconic bottle shape mixed with the color, mixed with that label and the font. Like, it's just all so perfect. And then you throw in some really, really attractive art. And yes, us having been Lagavulin fans or, insert distillery name fans here, we say, geez, I wish you stayed with the old. Meanwhile, there are people that are just getting into whiskey. And hey, if that gets them into Lagavulin, fantastic. Right. That's awesome. But I like my tried and true, Jason.
And let me throw in one more thing here. And again, this is something we kind of tease out in the interview, but I know it's difficult for an artist to come along and talk about their process. And as we interview Mo here, there are times when we can see her wriggling around the question a little bit, and there are moments when we kind of fill in some visual cues for the listeners, where you're not going to get to see the pained expression on her face. And so we kind of had a bit of to and fro in this interview where there are things that I was just simply curious about. I don't feel like I've got an artistic bone in my body speaking to somebody who is overflowing with artistry. And so I had some questions that I know are difficult to articulate, but she humoured us and she filled in the gaps for us as best she could. And I'm just glad she said yes to the interview. It was so good to just spend some time chatting with her, in all honesty.
You know, I have to argue with you and disagree when you say you don't have an artistic bone in your body. I feel as if you've got a keen palate to see artistry in spirit. And I think over the past 10, 11 years, the few times where we've blended whiskey together, I would argue that we created a type of art. It's not visual art, but it is art. And so I disagree with your statement, sir.
Well, having completed my first bottle of Wolf Island and having opened my second bottle of Wolf Island, if you wanted to call what's in that bottle artistry, I would not get in your way. So... you know, it doesn't hurt that I love the label on that as well as the liquid inside of it. For the record, not a Mo McAuliffe label.
That's true.
But yeah, absolutely delicious liquid. So yeah, no, cheers. I appreciate your words on that. I think that's the perfect seg into our conversation with Mo.
And here we go. Moana McAuliffe on One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. Moana McAuliffe, an old dear friend. And Moana McAuliffe, the lady who has, like, seriously made Single Cask Nation a true success. And this is the first time, you know, besides coming to Jubilee and introducing you to, like, nation members and things like that, I don't think we've ever properly put you in front of the nation in the most proper of ways. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my great pleasure. Please stop calling me Moana.
You're welcome. I do remember there being a round of applause at one of our afternoon tasting sessions at a New York Jubilee, where we had the opportunity to say, and on that day we may have also said Moana McAuliffe was in the room, the person behind the labels, and a spontaneous round of applause broke out. And I thought that was a really special moment, and I was really happy that you got some due while you were in that room.
Due. I thought that was really special as well. I think that was actually Chicago.
No.
Was that Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never been in a room with you in Chicago, which is not
there?
leading the witness.
You may not have been there.
No.
Was the last one you did in Chicago? I think
it would have been, yeah.
I think I flew out for that one.
You did fly out for that one.
I had a couple of pals with me.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Have we given you more than one round of applause? Like, okay,
if you did, I blocked the first one out. The second one was so good.
But do you remember the New York Jubilee where we would have the room up the stairs that was surrounded by glass?
I do.
And we would do the masterclass there?
I do.
That's where I remember you getting a round of applause.
I must have been properly sauced by then, and I just don't remember.
Are there any rooms you walk into where you don't get a round of applause?
More than you would think.
Okay.
I'm still reeling from Joshua introducing you as old and dear. Like that was. Whew. We're going to go back and remake the list that Joshua started this interview with.
Yeah, I'm not good with words.
I think we're in the same demographic, so it's okay.
You're far too generous. So I want to say one more thing, and then I'll hand the floor back to you. But we have been wanting to have you on the podcast for a good long while, and you've never really been overly interested. And we had, at least that's the feeling that we got. Maybe you're like, you guys are crazy, but we had a little meeting with Michael Nolan a few weeks ago, and Michael Nolan, who listens to every episode of the podcast, was saying, you guys need to have Mo on there. And to an extent that he was almost kind of giving us into a little bit of trouble that we hadn't done it up to this point. And it was at that moment that Joshua and I said, okay, Mo is coming on the podcast. We're not asking her, we're not inviting her, we're not giving her a chance to turn us down again. So Michael Nolan is the reason for this particular season.
Okay, Michael Nolan.
Daggers in your eyes, Mo?
His name's going on my list.
He's on a lot of shit lists.
Well, so years ago when we started Jubilee, that was 2012. And in 2013, that was our first festival where we said, around the world, basically any country around the world that has a whiskey festival has a whiskey bottling associated with it. However, in the U.S., that's never been a thing. And so we thought, well, maybe we should do a special Single Cask Nation bottling around that. And then that idea evolved a bit and said, no, it really should highlight the Jubilee. It really should be its own thing. While, yes, it's Single Cask Nation bottling, it's specific to the Jubilee Festival. And so now I'm trying to use my memory because what year is it? 2022. So this is, almost 10 years ago. And I think the conversation was along the lines of Jason saying, who can we get to do these labels? And your name came to me immediately because, Mo, I've always loved your art. You've always had a way of using something that seemed almost comic booky in a way, at least with some of your art. And for me as a comic dork, and for me as someone who we almost collaborated on a comic book because I had this comic book idea many years ago. Maybe we should get back to that. Anyway, I said, it's got to be Mo. It's got to be Mo who does this. So we reached out to you, and here was my first fear. My first fear was we have this idea, and I've never given someone who has an artistic vision a direction because I was scared to, right? Because you're the artist. I'm just someone who has a stupid idea, but you really took it and you ran with it, and then year over year across 12 bottlings, you've helped us tell this story about the hero and Chaya, and the travel, across the U.S. with this bottling, and so I wanted to give you the floor to maybe talk about your art a bit and some of what drove your style. Like, your style is a very specific one, and I think the listeners would love to hear about your inspirations for your overall style.
Oh gosh, well, thank you for the kind words. That's very sweet. It's been a pleasure to work with both of you. You're my favorite clients on earth ever. Some of the ideas you've given me have put me into a cold sweat trying to figure out how am I going to translate this to what size is it? I should have it memorized by now. 5 by 7 or 7 by 3.5. Yeah, that label. But definitely influenced by comic books, comic strips. I feel like I was reading them as soon as I was able to hold something in my hands. I remember looking at the newspaper and reading them with my dad. And then it was animation and coloring books. I always loved coloring books. And then video games, anime, all of that genre of like fantasy and line drawing and that sort of coloring book feel and like flat color. I've just always loved that. And that's been a major influence, which you can probably see.
Mm-hmm. And so with the idea of comic books, I don't know if this is an odd question, but I think about comic book artists, and there's always, you open up a comic book and you'll see, this person does the inking, this person does the coloring, this person does the lettering, and so on. And so, as you're drawing something, is there a different mindset when it comes to the inking and comes to the coloring? Like, how do you approach a piece when you're trying to put that together?
I have a squirrel brain, so I feel like my method is hear the idea, get excited, panic, procrastinate, pull out my sketchbook, sketch, research, sketch, procrastinate some more, sketch some more, and then pull everything into the computer. As soon as I took art classes in college, but as soon as I discovered that you could draw on the computer, I stopped paying attention in drawing class. So that's kind of what happens with my art is I'll start on paper with pencil and drawing paper. But at a certain point, it's like I hit a wall and I know I need to bring it into the computer and then start there. So yeah, that's how I think. I don't know how real artists do things, but that's my method.
So you sketch it out and then you get a sketch to a point and you scan that in and you convert that to outlines and then
and then things will kind of morph again once they're online because it has a different feel once you start laying down those black lines in the computer program. So yeah, it's sort of a birthing of sorts. It feels like.
So it's painful in spots.
Honestly, it is. I really put myself into all of these projects. I really sweat it out, and I put myself into all the characters that have appeared on the labels. I don't know. I'm an emotional creature and I attach quickly to people and characters. So yeah. They've all been a labor of love, but I have loved every minute of it.
Real quick question. Do you miss the tactile of the paper and the pen as you transition to the computer, which seems like a much colder medium?
I don't know if I'd say I miss it. I definitely feel the distinction between the two, and I do go back and forth sometimes. I can't always get the right turn of a line or something like that when I'm on the computer. So I do go back, and then I will rescan a sketch and then kind of merge it together with what I've worked on the computer.
Gotcha.
But I love that. I love that synergy between like old school and new school. It's so, I love it. I think it's perfect.
That was actually my question, Jason. because a mutual friend, Chris Swirsky, who Jason lovingly calls Santos. Jason was at Mimi's bat mitzvah. And he was sitting next to Chris, and he thought his name was Santos, and he just kept on calling him Santos. Anyway,
It turns out Chris Santos is a famous New York chef who I'm familiar with, and I just started calling Swirsky Santos. So here we are. We started out before we hit record talking about old man brain, and so there's classic old man brain right there. Here's a name. I'll attach it to you.
You are now Santos.
Yeah, he rolled with it. It was brilliant.
Yeah, he kind of just let it slide for a while, and then he corrected you, right?
No, I heard someone came to take his order, and because of the arrangements of the table, they said Swirsky. And I just looked at him. I've been calling you Santos. He said, yeah, it was fine. I figured I'd bring it up at some point in the
Cat's
future.
Out of the bag.
Which, by the way, for listeners who may not know this, Chris Swirsky is the drummer in my band, Come On a Dragon. and we have since written a song called Santos Sockmouth. And every vowel has an umlaut over it, which is just perfect. Why did I bring? Oh,
You're welcome.
So I brought him up because I remember years ago him working on an old album cover, and he had one of those, electronic pens and the little tablet that you would use to draw on the computer, and he tried to show me how to work it. And fuck, if that didn't feel as unnatural as could be, like it just, from a tactile standpoint, it didn't make sense. The feel was all wrong. I've never been an artist myself, so while I couldn't connect visions in my head to pencil in hand to pictures on paper, it was even less natural doing it with a digital pen. And so was there, just to extend on Jason's question, was there a learning curve in going to that, or do you use a mouse in your drawing? Like, how does that work?
No.
I wish listeners could have seen Mo's face there.
Yeah, the daggers. You talked about daggers before.
No,
what an idea.
Actually, when I'm feeling really lazy and I don't feel like getting up to get my tablet, sometimes I'll try to draw with the mouse, and it's like trying to draw with two hams like attached to your hands. It's not good. But yeah, there's definitely a learning curve to adjusting to drawing with a stylus in a tablet. What I used to do actually was I used to tape a piece of sketchbook paper over the tablet so it would feel like paper, and that would actually slow the pen down a little bit so it wouldn't slide across. The newer tablets are a little bit better, and the drag is a little bit more, so it's not as slippery. But I hate drawing on my iPad. It's just like ice. It's just like ice skates.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Without the little grabbers at the tip of your ice skates.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. There are no breaks.
So I'm going to get even deeper with this question here.
Okay, I'm ready.
Because you bring up the iPad, and it makes sense. You would think drawing on an iPad may feel more comfortable because you're looking directly at what you're drawing. Where on a computer, you're looking at a screen and you're just hoping you got the muscle memory in your hand and that it's going to work out. And so was that part of a disconnect as well for you? Is that something you felt you had to overcome?
I mean, you do it for a few hours and you just kind of get over it. Okay. Your brain gets rewired and it just becomes second nature.
Okay.
That's what I tell everybody who's starting to use that form for drawing. You just do it until it feels natural.
You go, Jay. I have a completely different line of questioning that no longer involves styluses.
Are we going to get into the? Are we going to get into the Apple PC thing now?
How dare you? How fucking dare you?
So I'm also going to kind of ask an unfair question, which I know, again, asking artists about their process and asking them to break it down is like asking a comedian why a joke is funny. But I want to reiterate what Joshua said earlier, which is your name has been the only name we've ever associated with art for our labels. And so when Joshua was sending me examples of your art, one of the things that struck me was the way you seem to capture motion in static images. And the unfair question is that purposeful? Is that just how your art expresses itself on the page? And again, Mo's face. You've got a face for a video podcast. We've got faces for audio podcasts. But there's another kind of side eye glance from Mo around that question. So, are you aware of that kind of motion that you present in your art?
I'm obsessed with trying to capture motion. I don't know why. I've just always been fascinated with how the human body moves. You know, I love watching dance performances. I love watching sports and just watching all the different ways a body can pose itself and the arcs of movement. So I try to capture that, you know. Hopefully I do that successfully, but it is something that's always on my mind. Like how am I gonna get that right moment where I capture this character and it's like, I don't know, it's encapsulating like the most emotion or the most momentum or just that magic moment. So definitely something I obsess about a little bit and I'm very passionate about, if you can't tell.
So how does it go from your brain to your hand to the page?
Uh,
Well, while you're thinking about that, there's a great example of this question. So in golf, Bubba Watson is a left-handed golfer.
Mm-hmm.
He shapes the ball all sorts of ways. And people invariably ask him, when you want to shape the ball from left to right, how do you position your body? How do you position your hands? How do you position the club face to make that happen? And he says, I just think in my head, left to right, and then I hit it. And they're like, wow. So what about the other shape then? Do you move something else because you're left-handed and that's a difficult shot? And he says, no, I just think about that other shape in my head and then I hit it and that's the shape it goes. Like, you cannot convey to somebody who doesn't have that skill set how to pull that off. And so I understand the question that I'm asking you is hugely unfair, but is there a part of you where you are conscious of it, or are you just thinking it and it's happening in front of you?
Oh, that's hard to explain. You know, I'm trying to think, like, what am I don't think I'm thinking in a strange way. I'm not doing this consciously, but I'm definitely processing something. I'm trying to process something. I'm just trying to feel the person or the thing that I'm drawing, and I'm just trying to move my hand and move the pencil like in that way. And if I could show you a sketch, I think you'd just see like these lines of movement, and it would probably look like, like a long exposure picture of somebody like moving their limbs around a little bit.
Like Bruce Lee in the Chinese Connection.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that precise, you know, it's just like lines and motion. I just try to translate that from my brain. Like, I know sometimes I picture it channeling from my brain, like down my arm into my fingertips, into the pencil onto the paper. But yeah, it's very hard to describe. It's more of a feeling that just happens, and I just let it go.
Yeah, I believe you when you say that, and I feel as someone who's not an artist and has difficulty drawing a line, that trying to convey that feeling, it's remarkable. So let me transition from that type of question then, and again, we're going to take our brains back a decade, and we can all struggle with that. But I'm looking at the first Jubilee bottle just off to my right side, and I know that when we approached you, and Josh takes the lead on the graphic stuff, we said to you, we'd like a Jewish guy on a brownstone step, right? And that was really your remit. Could you, as much as you can remember that process, can you talk about how you go from that one sentence suggestion to design to even blocking, and then the way that you presented the cask details on that label is the way those cask details were presented through the rest of the line. And I'm looking at the bottles on my shelf here. We never moved away from that from the very first label. And so, do you remember putting that together? Do you remember thinking, how am I going to go from this one sentence to a whiskey label?
Yeah, I think so. Well, usually what happens is Josh gives me some crazy idea. And then this one was not crazy. This was just a great idea. So I remember you telling me about it, Josh, and then I just remember starting to hear like the sounds of the city, and I tried to imagine what would it feel like to be sitting on a fire escape or sitting on the front stoops of a brownstone and just like feeling the concrete underneath me and hearing the sounds and knowing that there was this big building behind me and just trying to picture what I would see around me. And then I like zoom back and I take like the bird's eye view, like what would you see? And I saw our character sitting there, and he's holding the glass, and he's got that backdrop of the brownstones behind him. And just to make it fun, I started putting all these fun colors in, and I told you I love coloring books and that kind of feel. So I brought that in, and with the white paper background, and that's kind of what happened with that first idea and that first bottle.
Well, and looking at the blocking on it, you have got a brownstone right next to a blue brownstone next to a green brownstone. And so is there a part of your brain where you're thinking, can I really get away with a blue brownstone?
Yep.
You're nodding your head.
Yeah. I'm just going to do it anyway. Let's see what they say.
And so one of the questions we get as people see the line is, for those first 3 renderings, the hero was never coloured in terms of coloured in. He was left with white pants, white shoes, white shirt. Even the glass had a little bit of the metallic from the label coming through. And then into the second label where the Kaya appears, our heroine, she's not coloured in. She does have a scarf that has a bit more solid colouring. What was going on there with, what if we didn't colour in their clothing and just left them as this kind of blank canvas almost, even as a character?
Yeah, I mean, I think I thought about that when it comes, I don't want to get too political, but, when it comes to skin color and in my art, I liked the idea of people being able to see themselves in this depiction. So I just left it up to them. And I kind of actually pictured somebody taking the bottle and coloring it in, because that would be cool. But I also realized I couldn't leave the label completely blank of color because boring. And I was thinking, what is this going to look like on a shelf? How is this going to pop out and stand out from all the rest of the whiskey bottles if it was displayed among other whiskey bottles? How are we going to showcase this? And big white label, you don't see that with whiskey bottles. They're all there's a genre of whiskey bottle design, and it works and it's beautiful. But I thought let's try this and see what they say.
Yeah, it definitely did not look like any bourbon bottle on the market in 2013 when this was launched.
No, but I really like. I always liked the fact that the hero and the heroine were initially devoid of color, because in an odd way, with the color background, it made them pop out. Even though they had nothing, it brought them to the foreground. And I do like what you said. I know you don't want to be political, and I'm not trying to be political here either. But a lot of people, when they think of Jews, just think of a white guy with a big nose, or a white girl with a big nose. Meanwhile, there are black Jews and Chinese Jews and Indian Jews, and just like anybody, right? We are people of the world. So I really liked that you allowed people to see themselves in that image, which was very cool. And I hadn't even thought about that until you mentioned it, and now I think, oh gosh, that makes good sense. And the other thing that I want to say too, I really liked, after Jason asked you a question about creating the vision of the brownstone. The listeners can't see it because this is an audio podcast, but your eyes were closed the entire time. It was almost like watching you recreate, okay, how am I going to do this? And I really enjoyed seeing that.
You're welcome.
So
I knew we could get her to say it.
So there was one time, and not one time, but this was maybe the first time. I think we were working on a Jubilee bottling with Westland, and you had said, "Can you send me some of the liquid? I kind of see what you want to do here, but I need the liquid to help me tell that story." And so I'd really love to hear from you about how the flavors are influencing your whiskey and how you're trying to portray an image.
Oh, gosh. Was that the engagement one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was the engagement one. Yeah. Yep.
That was one of my favorite ones that I did for you guys. Yeah, I love that label. I smile every time I look at it, and I think I was smiling the whole time I was drawing it because I got so attached to these characters. But back to flavor, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm a very emotional person, and I love food. I love flavors, sounds. They're like teleportation devices to me. It's like time travel for me. So food, if I eat something really, really good, I'll start to cry because my eyes will just water, and I need a moment. I need to
Yeah.
So I'm sure I asked you for the liquid, because I was struggling with something when I was designing and drawing that label, and I needed to feel those characters. I don't know. This is how my brain works. It's weird. I know. I don't remember the flavor notes for that particular one, but for that label, I needed that for me to process the things that were going on in my brain to get them out onto the paper. But when I think of that label, I think of warmth, and I feel this warmth in my chest area, and just like the happiness and excitement of someone proposing to somebody else and starting this journey together. So yeah, that was your Westland.
What I love about it is you've got Chaya walking into the label. She's coming at the consumer. And she's walking in like this glamour puss. And the hair has got a flow to it. And her skirt has got a flow to it.
Yeah.
And we'd gone from a static seated position in the first label on the brownstone to a static seated position in the second label when they're on their first date, to now we've got this bit of action from Chaya walking in, this lovely motion going on. And the fact that she's walking in holding the first two bottles from the Jubilee, while the hero's holding the bunch of flowers, I'll say, with the engagement ring behind his back, you capture so much there, and with motion and with excitement. And it was very well done, and really reflected the work that Matt Hoffman was putting in, creating this Westland blend for us. And so you've got, two people coming together with an engagement, with whiskey coming together to form a single malt from Westland Distillery. Yeah, it was all lovely.
Thank you. You're so kind.
We'll tell you where to send the check. I want to fast forward a little bit, because some of our, so we have Single Cask Nation members, and then we have One Nation Under Whiskey listeners. And I would argue that some of our listeners may not be fully aware of the Jubilee bottling, simply because they were a bit older, but a bit more aware of what's been this sort of ongoing series, what we've been calling the Woodcut series, and where we had the 30-year-old Bowmore, the 30-year-old Imperial, and then the 28-year-old Laughing Frog. We can't say the distillery, Laughing Frog. Do the math. So this was one where I feel as if you got a bit more expressive in your art. Is it specifically with the Bowmore label? Like, I feel as if I saw a side of your art, at least with our labels, that I hadn't seen before. And so I'd love to hear about that, like what you took with you to put that one together, and if there was different techniques involved as well.
Yeah, for sure. That was more of I guess the presentation was more painterly, I suppose.
Yeah,
although there wasn't actual physical paint involved. That was all done on the computer. That was a stretch for me. My home base is that sort of comic book flat, bold lines, bold color. That's where my heart is. That's what I love. But I also love fantasy art. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, and our DM used to give us extra credit homework where we could do drawings and write stories, and we'd get extra points so we could level up our characters. And I was just over the moon. So I would draw my character, which was always a rogue, then a tiefling, then a halfling. Well, maybe this is for another podcast entirely.
I'm happy to go deep here.
Okay, hold me back. So when you said, I forget how you presented it to me. I think you said something about a dragon. You said something about an Asian dragon in the Scottish Ocean, in the Scottish seas, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, because
what's she doing there?
Because when we think about Bowmore, especially for the Bowmore dorks out there, and for the Bowmore dorks who are familiar with legendary, independently bottled Bowmores, you've got on the Bowmore side the Sea Dragon, and that was an Obi, an official bottling. And then from Samaroli, you had the Bowmore Bouquet. And I said, well, what if we had a dragon that instead of breathing fire was breathing flowers?
And that
I think
was
that's
just
really all I said. Yeah.
Brilliant. Like that. Josh needs to take credit for these insane ideas that are, you wrap so much like visual and emotional content in one sentence. You have no idea.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was the question?
No, just because it is, and you used that very technical term, painterly, before. Is that a real word, or did you just make that up?
It's a word artists use, I guess.
Oh, okay. I thought you just did what I do, or you make a word that sounds right.
No, it's a word. I've heard it said.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. But it definitely is. It was a different style, and so art. I mean, I love how you talk about how emotional you get, and so are you hitting different parts of your brain, of your emotions, of to create this very different style of art?
Yeah, I think, well, I mentioned that as soon as I learned that you could draw on the computer, I kind of stopped paying attention in my art classes. It's probably to my detriment. So I did it. I don't know how to paint. I'm terrified of like actual art supplies. This was very exploratory for me, but also really fun because I got to scan a bunch of like pictures and textures in and turn them into brushes and then lay them down on the computer canvas and just experiment with all of that stuff. And that's really fucking magical. Like, excuse my French, but just being able to go outside, take a picture of some dirt, some rocks, scan it into your computer, turn it into a brush, and then be able to paint it on something and change the colors. It's just, it will never stop blowing my mind. Yeah, for sure. Very, very different mindset going into that, and a little more panic just because, it was a new thing. But I liked how that dragon came out.
It was remarkable.
Yeah. Did you name the dragon? I don't think we ever gave the dragon the name, but did you ever have an internal name? Like I know we named the robot for the Imperial label.
Right. No, I don't think I did. I think it was just dragon. Just my dragon baby.
That's really interesting to hear that we took you that far outside of your comfort zone, because what came back was absolutely remarkable.
Stunning.
It's a hell of an achievement for being outside your comfort zone, which leads me, since again you're grimacing at us with our compliments, which leads me to Joshua coming to you and saying, there was a train on Speyside called the Puggy. We'd like to turn it into a Transformer style with line drawing. And I do know there was a part where you came back to us and said, these lines are going to be the death of me. and again, your rendering of, and I'm using Transformer with a small T and no TM on the end of it.
Wink, wink.
Clearly that, right? Clearly that style of toy. But,
look at that.
Right.
Gorgeous
the detail. Yeah, the detail you put into a train that had transformed on the label. Was there a point where, first of all, did you look at Joshua sideways when he put that sentence in front of you? And then when you started to render it, did you look at yourself sideways and say, stop with the details, Mo, you're going to lose your mind here?
Yes. And yes.
well, again, you're welcome.
That one was fun, but there may have been tears at one point. Just like, how the hell am I gonna pull this off in such a small format? You know, if you gave me a poster, that would be a different story. But to convey that very specific train somehow, and then also the lowercase t transformer character in that setting, it was definitely a challenge, but I think we got there eventually, and that was fun. I love drawing all the little like components and the gears and the gauges on the character.
It really, it's more than meets the eye, this label. I'll slip it there. Sorry.
I do remember showing that label to my kids and them just being absolutely floored by it.
Awesome.
And when, young kids are able to say cool about what's ultimately a whiskey label. And then as soon as it went before the nation as well, and, so many members of a certain age being able to say, oh, wow, I can't believe I'm going to get that, style of a toy that I used to play with on a whiskey label. Wow. So, yeah, you get wow so many times for your labels.
Oh, yay.
That's
awesome.
It's really cool. And then, a thing that we've come back to you with a couple of times is we'd like to take this opportunity to put you on the label. And so the penultimate Whisky Jewbilee label, where our characters do get married, on the third Woodcut series, where we have the Laughing Frog label, we got you to put yourself on that label as well. How do you feel about being asked to put yourself on the label?
Super weird. It was more of a like, okay, I guess I'll do that.
Wow. Okay.
No, not. I don't want you to feel bad about it. It just, I'm not really comfortable in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Not something that I aim for. That's all.
But it's in coming up with an idea and saying, all right, Mo, this is what we'd like to see. I've always approached it from the perspective of she is a master of her art. She knows her way around a pen. She knows her way around Adobe Illustrator. And I've never had that fear that you wouldn't be able to do what we're hoping to see on a label, simply because everything I've seen you do has been beautiful, magical, just so pretty and nice.
You.
And but hearing your struggles, it's interesting. It doesn't come across in your art at all. The struggles that you talk about, it really doesn't. And so, what I'm saying is, get ready for the 4th Woodcut label.
Oh my god! If I ever have to draw another frog, I'm going to jump off a cliff. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Love you.
The raining frogs is so cool, though.
It was such a cool idea. Again, you have to credit Josh. I think this was your idea too, right?
It was, but I mean, it really came from just having rewatched Magnolia again, and the idea was a bit of a nod to that, because I think it's an absolutely beautiful movie. And we got whiskey from a distillery that we couldn't really say where it was from. And, well, another bottler had something called Leapfrog. And we said, okay, well, we can't use that again. And so here we are with Laughing Frog. And so that was only partially my idea.
Yeah, it's very rare that I get to have a little corner of a label and the laughing, having us on the label laughing. Came from me, which exactly. I'll also put a little teaser here, which is if we select the cask that we've got our eyes on for the 4th, it's not to say we will, but if we do get that, I actually led the imagery idea on that one.
Yes, you did.
And
cool.
And so you can almost guarantee that will not be the cask that ends up being bottled. And we'll be at the 11th hour saying, Joshua, what should we do? What should we do? and he will pull it out in the 11th hour, and then whatever we charge you with, you will pull it off in the 12th. So there's one more label that I desperately want to bring up, and as we've been chatting today, and we had this conversation a little bit with Sam and Dave from Boutique, where it might take a while to get somebody on the podcast, but somehow the timing just works out really well. And now that we've got you on the podcast, Mo, I'm thinking of all the work that's being done to launch our new website, and the archive has been a major focus there. And for us now celebrating 10 years of delivering whiskey to the nation members are going to be able to go back through this archive on the website and see your labels. People in Australia who know us through the Padcost, people in Europe who know us through the Padcost will be able to come onto the website and see your imagery within the archive. And so I think the timing is really quite nice for this conversation. As you nod your head at me, thank you, Jim. So I'm trying again not to use a distillery name here, but the 24-year-old bourbon that we released, that was an opportunity for us to put one of your labels into the UK, into Sweden, into Germany. It was offered to Japan and they didn't take us up on it. But it gave us a chance to put your art before new people and new countries. And one of the things, as soon as we started talking about pre-fire distillery liquid, my mind, and again, as we've talked about this process, my mind is never abuzz with imagery. Never is. And all I could think of was Van Gogh's Starry Night. And the way you've rendered smoke in other examples for us, fire in other examples for us, I just thought a Mo version of something like Van Gogh's Starry Night would just be so striking with darkness, but then fire. And I'm curious, when we come to an artist with another artist's insanely famous artwork as inspiration, do you find that somewhat restricting? Do you find it quite exciting that you can bounce off of that with your own inspiration? What was the experience of that label like, given that we were throwing some key terms and even an artist at you?
I think I appreciate the restriction or the guidelines. Otherwise, the squirrel brain will just like go all over the place trying to nail it, you know. With that particular label, I do remember something you said, though. I think you said something about rivers of fire. And that that was like a spike in my brain. I was like, oh, that's it. And then the Van Gogh thing and the smoke. And then I was able to run with it from there.
Mm-hmm. What was the word again? I missed that. And I don't remember the particular comment.
Rivers of fire. He was explaining.
Of fire. Yes, yes. Yeah.
He was explaining to me what he envisioned for the label. And he said that phrase. And I was like, oh. That's the one.
Well, and I'm glad it resonated with you, because in looking at footage of a fire that happened to Heaven Hill, there's and reading the reports of it, you know, the imagery is rivers of fire, and in the reports people are talking about rivers of fire, and to think of a catastrophe where the river has caught fire is pretty damn significant and really kind of burrows into your brain.
Yes.
And for this to be happening at night, when people are afraid of where that might spread to, where that might go.
Right.
You know, firefighters on the scene being faced with rivers of fire, and dealing with alcohol that's ablaze. It's all serious stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought the way you rendered it on the label didn't make light of the seriousness and really captured a lot of that. And it's hard to pick a favorite label, right? They're all absolutely fucking brilliant. But I have that bottle just up to my right side, and it's so incredibly eye-catching. The reds that are in it, the night sky with the smoke.
The number of people who have reached out to us, can you get that on a shirt? We want to see that on a shirt. Has been very, very cool. And so we've actually started having some discussions about, okay, how can we get some of this artwork onto shirts? So yeah, we need to hop on that, Jason.
Assuming Mo's okay with our artwork on the shirt.
Assuming Mo's okay with that. Okay. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about some of your art that has nothing to do with our labels.
Wait, what? Mo's got art that's nothing to do with our labels? Breaking news here.
Yeah, because I know art is not necessarily your full-time job, or being commissioned for art is not necessarily your full-time job, but it is part of your life for sure. And so, like, how much of that does play part of your life?
At the moment, less than I'd like it to. I just had a big move. I just started a new job that's super busy, and it's a completely different industry. So I'm very busy learning and just doing that right now. And I've been kind of itching to create something, and it's been a little while. So I'm getting a little crazy. So I don't have any serious projects going on right now. I took an herbology class that I graduated from a couple months ago, and I did a couple of things for that. I made like a coloring book page to hand out to the class, and that was super fun. I started working on some drawings for my partner, Ryan. who's building some guitar pedals. So I did like this crazy like witch lady, and I started drawing a Yeti and a polar bear. So there's a couple of like weird little things that are just back burner, but totally leisure, like not worky art stuff, which I'm okay with right now. I think I needed to take a little break, but I'm ready to get back into it.
So two things here. I mean, it is nice to hear you say you needed to take a little bit of a break from that. I don't know why it's nice to hear that, but it's nice to, like, I'm someone who needs to take a break from a lot of things, but I don't allow myself. So I can understand, like, when you as a person can recognize that and take advantage of it. That's very cool. The fact that Ryan is making guitar pedals, I've got to reach out to him because I'm a guitar pedal junkie. So I'm gonna let him know I'm gonna reach out to him on that one.
There are so many guitar pedals in this house. It's
gosh.
Well, I'm thinking witches and polar bears would look fantastic on a whiskey label.
Yeah.
A guitar pedal collaboration with a whiskey company.
Oh my God, that would be so
Oh my
cool.
God. Oh my God.
I'm glad I can make the two of you happy.
He makes guitars
Did you get both
too.
of you?
Sorry?
Oh, he makes guitars too.
Yeah, him and his buddy.
What a
That's
creative
right.
couple.
Yeah, Ryan and Ryan, the luthiers.
The Ryans,
Ryan
they
Welcome
make,
made me a 6-string bass, my
That's
Jewcaster Shesh.
That's
yeah.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
You could
Does
have
Ryan? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
you could have a limited edition guitar /
Does he do
whiskey
guitars
combo.
or basses?
I think they do both. I think it's mostly basses.
Okay.
I don't know. You'll have to interview them on another.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm in the wrong rabbit hole.
There's no wrong
Always the
rabbit
wrong
hole.
rabbit hole with you. So, as always, conscious of time and just, getting out of here. But there's a question that I would regret not asking you, especially since you brought up food earlier and you brought up taste and you talked about combining, the flavors of the liquid with that third label we did for the Jubilee with Westland. But I'm curious for you. I know you are a whiskey drinker and I know you enjoy whiskey. What's the experience like for you when you're enjoying whiskey? Is it a creative experience for you? Are there images bouncing? Are there any whiskies you've welled up about? You've shed a tear with? Open-ended question about your whiskey enjoyment.
There was a Glen Murray that you guys gave me. I think it was a 12-year-old. That was my fave. It's long gone now. So anything I know about whiskey is because of you guys or by way of you. I didn't really know much about it before you asked me to start doing work for you. So it was really interesting getting some really top-notch elite whiskey right out the gate. And not really having anything lower tier than that. So I feel like you sort of birthed a whiskey snob without knowing it. But I feel also sort of like an imposter. I have imposter syndrome about whiskey because I feel like I can tell people, oh no, don't drink that. That's not good. Like this will be good. That'll be good. But I just know it because of what you guys told me and what you have given to me. So I don't know. I don't know if I've ever welled up yet. I know that my palate is definitely not as sophisticated as yours. I don't get all of the tasting notes all of the time, but I love the poetry of it, and I love.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Do images come into your head as you're drinking? I know you're saying I'm not getting the flavor notes, but Are you seeing things? Hopefully you're not hearing voices, but are you seeing things?
I would welcome that, actually. I think that would be really cool.
After the 8th pour, you'd be amazed what happens. Hashtag, please drink responsibly. Go on. Yep.
Disclaimer. I like the peaty whiskeys the best. And I often get transported to Scotland. I've been there once, and I completely have a crush on everything Scottish, and I want to go back there so badly. But yeah, as far as imagery, like those peaty ones, they transport me, and that's what I see. I see the rocks on the beach, and I hear the ocean and that like salty smell in the air, and the greenest green you could possibly imagine. I've never seen that green before in my life, and I will never scour it out of my brain and my heart. So to answer your question, I guess I do see some imagery. Didn't think I did, but I guess I do.
And for the listener, the eyes were closed again. You were transported back to Scotland on that beach. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Joshua, I don't want to leave you hanging if you've got...
just one final question, because I guess I wasn't fully aware that you didn't have much experience with whiskey before us. And so my question was simply, was there a bit of a learning curve? Because right, most people are going to start with something that's a Johnny Walker or an Evan Williams, and it's at 40% alcohol. And you went straight to 50s, 60% alcohol, just like full throttle stuff. Yeah, and so at first were you like, fucking hell? Or was it like, okay, there's something going on here? And yeah, like, what was that experience like for you? Do you recall it? Or did you have so much you can't recall it?
I do remember a what the fuck moment when we traveled together early one morning to a Whisky Jewbilee in New York, where we had a toast before we left.
Oh, that's right. We went to Ari's place to pick up some of his catering stuff or something like that, or pick up the glasses that he had to wash.
Right.
Because he had to put the glasses through the mikveh. That's right. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. That was a bruiser. That was one moment where I was like, "Whoa, I'm out of my league." Just because you guys were just so cool and you knew everything about whiskey. You're giving this cool ass whiskey like first thing in the morning. Like, we're gonna do this thing, and now we're gonna go have this whiskey tasting that's all day, and you're gonna take pictures, and it's gonna be great. And here you go, cheers. And it was awesome whiskey. Like not the worst thing to do first thing in the morning, but at the same time, I was like, whew.
This is gonna be a long day.
Yeah, it was a good day. Learning curve. Yeah, I definitely didn't know much about whiskey. Whiskey with a Y, whiskey with an EY. I learned all that from you. And just how complex and how layered the flavoring could be. Definitely a learning curve for sure, but one I've enjoyed traveling.
Mo, seeing your face again has been an absolute joy. Jason and I are actually looking to come out to Chicago in May. We're doing a Single Cask Nation sort of 10th anniversary. Even though we're really 11 years as a company, it's 10 years having whiskey to sell. And so I don't know what you've got going on May 10, but we'd love to have you as part of that celebration, because really, I don't think we would necessarily be where we are if we didn't have your art to help us along. So if you have no plans, we'd love to see you, and we'd love to hug the living shit out of you.
Oh, same. It's a date.
Thank you. Good. Perfect.
Brilliant.
Bring Ryan and his guitar pedals too.
Okay.
Not that he's using you to get to Ryan, but
I
here we
know
are.
what's going on.
Controversial ending. Yeah, just to reiterate, thanks a million, Mo. You've been absolutely invaluable to us, and your partnership, your friendship has just been wonderful. And you make us smile whenever we spend time with you and when you send us remarkable labels. So cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All the thanks to Mo for taking the time to hang out with us, to indulge our questions, and really to give us a chance to go down memory lane. I know we've been happily celebrating 10 years of putting whiskey in front of people in the nation. And as you rightly said before we went into that, we're not delivering the same product to the nation without Mo being a part of it. So sincere thanks to her for her friendship and her assistance. And one of the parts I was going to respond to that you'd mentioned earlier, Joshua, is you've known Mo for over 20 years and love her dearly. Here's me. I'm now a decade into knowing Mo, enjoying her friendship, and always looked forward to when we could hang out together at the Jubilees. I didn't really see her outside of that, living in two very different states, but she's just absolutely lovely and adorable and wonderful and thoughtful. And yes, I'm really glad that when you had one person in mind for artwork for a label, it was Mo. And here we are.
Yeah, it was Mo. You know, I met her through Chris Swirsky, who you lovingly call Santos, who is also the drummer for my band Kimono Dragon. And just so you're aware, because I don't know if you know this, Jason, when we first started as a band, it was with this idea that we were characters. Like, we created a story around this band, and we have a trailer. We made a trailer for a movie we wanted to do. We were even in talks with someone at A&E for a potential series around this thing early on. And so Mo, in that realm of this world, she was Kimono Dragon, and she was a 1,000-year-old Asian fighter, right? She's half Filipino, half Scottish, and right. So we weren't appropriating anything there. I mean, not with her character. We were definitely appropriating with our wearing gis, and my guitar player Joe was Jojono Dragon, and he was her son, and yeah, so you know, she was just part of the crew, and so it was nice when we started the company and I let the band go that relationship with Mo could continue despite not having the band anymore, because in the end, right, we're all still good friends, and sadly now she's in Chicago, so it makes things very difficult. But yeah, so there you go.
You crazy 20-something-year-olds with your crazy dreams and aspirations. It's amazing where 2 decades goes. I remember thinking of 20-year-old whiskey and just think, oh my God, that's been in the cask forever. And now going from 28 to 48 and just looking back, I'm just like, wow, it's the blinking of an eye. It's unbelievable how quickly that time passes.
Yep.
Anyway.
So, Jason, do we have any news?
We've got all the news that's fit to print.
All right. So you're at the printing press. Steve Guttenberg just got done filming Police Academy 27. So you got the Guttenberg press all ready to print the news. Do I have that right? Is that connection correct?
I have no idea. No idea. You absolutely just ran a country mile in another man's shoes. I was just letting you do what you do.
Extra, extra! Read all about it. Life story of Playboy Penny. Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it. Me and that Playboy and Penny.
I know you have some news to talk about. I've got some news to talk about as well, but I'm always a gentleman, and I would love to give the floor to you.
Our first piece is a follow-up on last episode, and this is such a perfect illustration of the world in which we live. The Backwoods Heritage Rye was on its way. We had a date for it coming in, and that date changed and got pushed off by 2 weeks. And I sent you the King Theoden gif. So it begins, which is, this is a delay now. Doesn't mean it's the only one. Doesn't mean that now the second date will be the delivered date to port. And having friends over in Orange County and LA and San Francisco and just hearing about traffic jams of container ships parked in waters where they don't normally park, and just thinking, well, we're in a queue to get into a port, to get unloaded, to get into customs. So we've shared as much as we know. Hopefully this is the week, the launch of this episode on March 23rd. Hopefully this is the week. But when it comes to the ports, when you get the first change of date, it doesn't tend to be the last change of date.
Right, and then there's one thing is getting to the port. Like, if you get to the port, congrats, good on you. But then there's the time at the port to be, unloaded, which is probably another 2 to 3 weeks. It's a bit of a nightmare. I heard a story, just speaking of logistics, right, where it used to be when you had a shipment coming from Scotland to the U.S., typically you'd be looking at a 2.5 month, maybe 3 month worst case scenario trip of getting to the docks and being released from the docks. And now you're looking at 4 months, 5 months, 7 months, etc. Things have gotten so bad that one of the ways that freight companies are looking to ease the pain is companies like FedEx and others with their small package are moving the small package stuff to smaller boats that would then go on riverways.
Oh my gosh.
They're now accessing freshwater riverways to get in and around. This is how bad it's gotten. Like, this is, and Sam was mentioning it the other day, Sam Filmus that is, where the global logistics situation, if you want to think about how bad it is, take the 25% tariffs and take all of the various shutdowns due to COVID and multiply it by 5 times. That's everything. It's from action figures to whiskey, to clothing, to bedding, to whatever. Nightmarish. Yep.
Yeah, it's insane. Absolutely insane. So, yeah, watch this space. Maybe the next episode will have another update for you. Oh, gosh. I just want it to come in so badly and get it sold and get it out and into mouths. It is so good. Selfishly, I just want to be drinking it.
Yep. And so with that in mind, we do have a bit of good news. We touched on it, I think, last episode. We talked about some blends that we've got coming out, which were, single cask blends that we bottled for some clubs who purchased their allocation of it. And so we're going to be opening that up to Nation members shortly. And
Smaller numbers.
Smaller numbers
available. No lottery involved. Just to grab them when you can.
And so then, in addition to the 2 blends, we have about 4 different projects right now about to be bottled in our Kentucky warehouse. Some of them are single casks. Some of them will be cask marriages. And then we've got a slew of casks in Scotland that are about to be bottled as well. So we've got a lot going on. We're just going to be keeping an eye on the various global logistics and see how quickly or not so quickly we can get it out and into people's doorsteps, onto people's doorsteps.
We've said on this podcast for years and years, moving at the speed of Scotland. And I wish we could go back to those days, because those were lightning fast compared to moving at the speed of the global supply chain. So
oh my gosh.
We're doing our best, moment in, moment out. All you can be is patient, and it will happen.
Yep. It will happen. So you took the news out my mouth. That was the news that I had to deliver. So I think we may have tied that in a little bow, Jason.
Excellente. Let's pick out some glassware.
All right. Hold on. Let me. Oh.
No, don't juggle it.
Right.
Don't smash it. Don't throw it against the wall. Just carefully pick it up.
So I've picked up glassware, and I've picked up.
Pick it up.
You sent me something that says sample number 1, and then secondarily, you sent me something that says sample number 2.
Yes. And let me pour these, and I will tell you a little bit more about my plan, because I cannot tell you about my plan while pouring and making sure what I'm pouring doesn't make it into the video that you and I can see. Sample 1 goes on your left side.
All right, so I have officially poured sample 1 and sample 2. I've got sample 1 on my left, and I got sample 2 on my other left, known as my right. Known as my right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how much I can trust you when you get into those kind of mindsets. All right, so one of the things that we're doing with season 6 is we're playing a few games. We're having a bit of fun, and the game that I introduced you to in the last episode was the reading of that. I'm not even going to say which distillery, in case somebody wants to go from this episode back into the last one. Maybe they're behind. I'm not going to spoil it, but it was a distillery tasting note, and from 1989, and I thoroughly enjoyed that little bit of chat, and we will in some future episodes play that with guests, and again just have a bit of fun. Another aspect that inspired us for season 6 was in talking to Steve Hawley when we were doing the Judgment of Westland, and he talked then about Westland, the team at Westland, doing a weekly blind tasting where they just gather, they just pour some whiskey in some glassware, they have some chats about it, they have some back and forth about it. And in that conversation with Steve, you and I both said, that's a terrific idea. Absolutely terrific. And so it got us thinking for season 6 that, again, not every episode, but wouldn't it be nice for you and I to kind of get together, put out some blind samples, have a little chat about them, see what we're getting, see what we're learning. The goal, and I'm hoping this makes Steve happy, the goal is not to guess what they are.
Shit.
It's not a success or failure by the correct name coming out. But instead, because here we are, we're on a podcast, the Padcost, as many of our wonderful, wonderful listeners refer to it in the emails they send in. We're on a visual, we're on an audible medium without any visuals. And watching people taste whiskey is already a pretty dull enterprise. Listening to people tasting may also be a dull enterprise. But I think the conversation that you and I can have around this I think is always worthwhile. And then, because I am Jason Three Names who does love sandwiches, I do have a little ace up my sleeve for today's blind tasting. So, without further ado, pick up sample number 1 that's on your original left and tell me what you're getting.
I'm getting oak up front. I'm getting sweet oak coming through. So you've got...
You went straight to the nose. You didn't do an eyeball for the listeners.
Because I didn't think, back to your point about this not necessarily being a visual podcast, I didn't think to call out the color, but I will relent. I will give out the color. So this, to me, smells like a bourbon, an albeit young bourbon. And given the color, I would say that color affirms that assessment. It's not deep. It's not that deep, dark color that you would see in maybe, some of the wild turkeys that we bottled, or just, pick up any bourbon, right? What's the color of bourbon? It's bourbon. This doesn't have the color of bourbon. It's a bit lighter, almost like a burnished brass.
But what about the oils? Look at the oils gathering rich. On the side of the glass there. Yeah. That is unctuous. These are thick legs running down these glasses.
This whiskey's got legs, and it knows how to use them.
It does know how to use them. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so just from this point, pick up the one that's over your...
So am I not allowed to smell?
Your non-traditional left. Not yet.
Right, okay.
Not yet. You already gave us the oak. Okay. And so I'm curious about the oils between the two of them, and I'm curious about the color between the two of them.
So the color on this seems to be a tad lighter, and the legs do not appear to be as thick. Like it actually, when you tip the liquid to the side of the glass, so it coats the side of the glass, and then you go back, it starts off almost looking like, a whiskey blanket, and then maybe some legs appear, but they go real quick.
I like your comment on going real quick, because the oil on sample 1 passes much slower down the glass.
Yep. So,
and I also like what you're saying about a little lighter. It really is a hair lighter on the right side sample. Okay, initial nose on the right sample. I know you gave us oak on the original left. What about on the right side?
Well, it's I'm getting oak there for sure, but this seems to be more grain forward. It's not as sweet smelling like that. There's such a sweetness to oak. Like fresh oak has got that, fresh oak has got that brown sugar, that vanilla, that coconut going on, right?
And I just put my nose back into the first sample, and I just was thinking brown sugar as you said brown sugar out loud.
And this,
because it is. There's a sweetness and unctuousness from sample 1 that isn't as present in sample 2.
But I would say that I kind of like sample 2 a bit more. Sample 2 seems a bit less obvious, and I kind of like that. Sometimes obvious is good, but like when you can detect the grain, see what's going on, right? A lot of times I use that note crackling oat brand for our American listeners. They may know that, but it's like sort of sweetened grains, right? Sweetened with honey and you get that in sample number 2, but then behind it, supporting it, is that oak, where on sample number 1, the oak is like jumping up and down, waving its hands. Pay attention to me, pay attention to me.
So let's push on and give a taste.
What am I tasting?
Let's give a little sip to sample 1.
Okay. Okay. Ooh. Oh, I kind of like that. It's still, it's still very sweet, but there's a There's a citrusy component mid-palate that really stays through to the finish on it. Almost like a candied orange peel going on there.
I would definitely... Actually, I would even go a little farther with you here. I would say chocolate-coated candied orange peels on the mid-palate of sample.
Oh, my gosh. We have a local chocolatier here in town that makes those. They candy their orange peels and they dip them. Holy crap.
It was my father-in-law's favorite sweet treat. And Tamara occasionally makes chocolate-coated candied orange peels.
God bless her. God bless her.
So with that particular note in mind, let's dive into sample 2.
Okay.
Because I know on sample 1 we talked about more sweeter on the nose, more oak on the nose. Number 2 seemed to be a bit more grain forward on the nose, a slightly subdued oak on the nose. Now we're talking about this chocolate-coated orange peel on the mid palate of sample 1. What are you finding with sample 2 on the palate?
That is a horse of a different color. It's wow. The palate, the palate is almost exactly like the nose, wherein you've got these grain forward flavors going on, but then it finishes with the sweet oak. Just like the nose, you've got the grain forward going on, but you had the sweet oak supporting it in the background.
Do you get an herbaceousness from sample 2?
And so that's where I was going. I was about to take a second sip because I wanted to see if it was herbaceous or almost white tea-like, like sweetened white tea-like. So let me give it another sip.
Yeah, for me, I'm always grappling with that dill note and how that dill note manifests itself. And I like your inclusion of white tea or just even the possibility of it. Not that you're saying it's in here, just the possibility of it. Because I think white tea or even green tea would take your herbaceousness in a different direction than a dill. But for me, it's the beginnings of dill going on in sample 2.
Yeah, see, I'm not getting an herbaceousness like that. I'm getting...
Oh, okay.
I'm almost getting like a bit of like sassafras leaf, right? Like the beginnings of making a root beer, right? Like there is an herbaceousness to it, but it's more hardy and less grassy, if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
Right, but
I was busy tasting sample 1 again.
Right, but there's a difference between dill or fennel than there is to like sassafras or I'm trying to think of another sort of sweeter sort of herbaceous kind of thing, or like honeysuckle, right? There's a difference between those things. They are herbaceous because they are, herbs basically, but it's a sweeter approach to my palate. I'm not getting that dill that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. But again, I'm just saying the beginnings of dill. I'm not saying this is a big, dill pickle experience.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of softer, more subtle, still in the pot, fresh dill.
So it's not going to dough. It's just the dill.
A deer?
Female deer?
So talk to me about your finishes between the two of them.
Okay. So
anything memorable happening?
I'll tell you one thing about this finish. It's one note.
Which sample?
Sorry. Sample number 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's one note.
Mm-hmm.
But it lasts forever. It's almost a minty orange peel. It's almost if you were to muddle spearmint leaves with that candied orange peel that we talked about, and it just lingers.
I love your mention of mint because I've got this clarity in the back of my throat. Whereas if you've just brushed your teeth with a nice peppermint or a spearmint toothpaste, and then you get this clarity coming up from the back of your throat, that's exactly what I'm experiencing right now.
Look at that.
I'm not necessarily getting the citrus. I'm not necessarily getting them muddled together, but I've got that clarity of mint. Well, that's a great observation, Joshua.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
Yes, you are.
Tip your server. So let me talk. I'm going to go back to sample number 1 to sample the finish on that, or to discover the finish on that, I should say.
Actually, that is so minty. I'm actually going to take a little sip of black coffee between these two to better judge the finish.
Yeah, sample number 1 gets darker on the finish. It's like ground coffee,
Honestly, there was no leading the witness here.
But it's ground coffee, it's spun sugar, it's brown sugar, it's demerara, it's molasses. Like it really is sort of a heavier kind of sweetness going on there. It's funny, like that sample number 1 I like because it's just sort of brainless and easy. But if you really pay attention, there's a lot going on in the finish, and it makes me think of something Gene Sharness talks about quite a lot. Gene from Warehouse Liquors in Chicago, where he can like a whiskey, he can even love a whiskey, but if there's no finish, then that whiskey's dead to him, right? Like you need. The whiskey needs to give you something to remember it by. And if the last thing you remember is that it had no finish, then it's a bad whiskey. And what's interesting about this whiskey is on the nose and palate, it was like, okay, that tastes like bourbon. But then you focus on the finish, and it's going deeper and deeper and heavier and showing you different sides of heavy, dark sweetness. That was an intriguing little whiskey.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
As someone who knows what it is, I agree. I like your summation of sample 1. Summation of sample 2.
Okay, I'm gonna give it one last nose, and then one last sip. It's lighter overall. I think on both samples 1 and samples 2, there's a bit of a ride. I should say there's a bit of a lack of ride from nose to palate to finish, in that these whiskeys are both, it's not that they're flat, but they're doing a really good job of saying, did you like what you found on the nose? Great, because that's exactly what I'm going to deliver to you on the palate. And I would say that while the finish on this is nice and takes on the second sample is nice and takes us into a different territory, right? With that muddled spearmint along with the candied orange peel. I liked what the finish was doing more on sample 1. So I think from a nose to palate to finish journey, I think sample number 1 is my preferred whiskey, despite the fact that I usually prefer more grain forward whiskeys, less oak forward whiskeys.
That's interesting. See, this is why it's always wonderful when we have these conversations, because there are oftentimes when you and I are selecting casks, there are so many points of similarity between both of our palates that essentially with a range of blind samples we'll invariably select the same casks. But it's so interesting when we have these types of conversations. I think, oh yeah, there are subtle differences between what I really look for and enjoy and what you look for. Like, I almost never go for grain forward. if we're talking bourbon, I am looking for oak. I am looking for that subtle herbaceousness in the background. I am looking for that bit of brown sugar sweetness.
Yeah.
To have you looking for grain forward, it's really, really interesting.
It's in part, it's because I'm an oakophobe. Like, I love bourbon. And I know sometimes, a lot of times when I talk, I make no bones about it. Malt whiskey is my love first and foremost, and specifically Scotch malt whiskey, right?
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I have that preference is I'm very sensitive to astringency and the astringency that new charred oak could bring to bourbon. And so when bourbon gets to 8, 9, 10, 12 years of age, you start dancing with the devil a little bit, and you start getting a bit more oaky, and so that's why I'm always looking for that grain, in the hopes that the grain wins out and it doesn't taste like I'm just sucking on burnt popsicle sticks.
Oh no, I agreed. Yeah, agreed. I like layers. Hence, I'm saying going for that little bit of herbaceousness, but also with that brown sugar. Right? I don't want to be licking a stick.
Though.
Yeah, but not to be licking a stick.
Okay.
Right. Okay. I always trust oak to frame an experience, not to be the experience itself. Mm-hmm. So with both of these in hand, and I'm not going to put you on the spot here. It's bourbon, right? There's thousands of options here, but is there anything you want to say or offer before I make the reveal here?
I will say that I think both whiskeys are really well made. I can't say whether or not they're from the same distillery. I think, and I mentioned this in our very first episode of season 1, where I felt as if my overall knowledge of bourbon or American whiskey production, specifically bourbon and rye, I felt was not to the level that malt whiskey was. I would even argue that my palate is not up to the level when it comes to bourbon and rye that it is with malt whiskey, because I can't, it's obvious when you have a bourbon, you can use wheat in there, you can use rye, those are your flavoring grains, right? And I can't always discover, you know what, that I think has more wheat going on there. I think that's got some malt going, Yeah. And so I can't tell if these are similar mash bills, different mash bills. There are differences. Part of me wonders if the difference is simply two different casks doing two different things to the same distillate. Like, I want to say that's my hunch, but I could very well be wrong here. I could very well be wrong. But to wrap that up, I think they're both really well-made whiskeys. I would not kick these out of bed for getting crumbs in the sheets.
If you had to buy one, and I know that's always an unfair question. You and I sit surrounded by bottles of whiskey. If you had to buy one, which one would you buy?
Believe it or not, I would buy sample number 1.
Okay. I, too, would buy sample number 1. So to clarify a little point you made a moment ago was you said episode 1 of season 1 you talked about. and I was like, oh my God, has he just re-listened to the very first David Stirk episode? And then everything you said was from the first episode of this season.
Season 6.
So, season 6. That. The reason I wanted to conduct this blind tasting and have us explore this is our last episode with Bruce Russell at Wild Turkey. I asked him on the record a whiskey that I loved and cherished and bought a lot of was going away. And did he have a suggested replacement for said whiskey? And he did make a recommendation. And today we have tasted the whiskey that has simply gone away. next to the replacement suggested by Bruce Russell. And each of us has said the replacement doesn't live up to the original selection.
It's so fun. So as I was nosing and tasting that, I was wondering, is that the Heaven Hill 6-year-old? Because there's this sort of softer side to it. But, that's so great.
It's a hell of a well-done whiskey.
A $13 bottle, right?
Yep. 6-year-old, bottled in bond, Heaven Hill, 50% alcohol, which was only available in Kentucky and Indiana. Mm-hmm. And I did pick it up every trip through to Kentucky. And when I first started buying this, it was $12 a bottle. When they discontinued it, it was $15 a bottle. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But just a cracker. I poured it for everybody coming into my house. I would often pour it blind and say, what would you pay for that? Yeah. And invariably people would say 25, 35, which I think we were too successful, because when they did discontinue this, they replaced it with a 7-year-old that is $40. So, damn it. Too successful. And so the replacement, as suggested by Bruce Russell, who, and again, I think this speaks to how we interact with people, right? Bruce Russell, third generation wild turkey. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about wild turkey till the cows come home. Loves wild turkey. But is also a bourbon guy and a rye guy and a mezcal guy. Mm-hmm. And we've talked to him about other things on the podcast. And as a bourbon guy, he said, well, if you really like the 6-year-old Heaven Hill bottled in bond, give the Evan Williams bottled in bond a try. Mm-hmm. There's no age statement on this, but it is 50% alcohol. And it's so interesting what you said about that mint, that fresh mint in the finish. Yeah. I'm perfectly happy with what this Evan Williams is doing. And I don't know what this would be like for you in Connecticut. This is, of course, available nationally, and I'd even hazard a guess to say internationally, but eek. This is for the 75 CL, the 750 ml bottle. This is $18 before tax in Virginia.
All day long.
$18 here. And I think if it got up to 22, 25, again, you'd still be in a wheelhouse of a perfectly quaffable bourbon and a perfectly useful cocktail ingredient.
Yeah. You could brainlessly drink this, fully enjoying it. You could, put a couple cubes of ice in there if you wanted to on a hot summer day, or you could make a nice Manhattan.
For the record, and for any listeners who are not knowledgeable about bourbon, I'm busy saying it's got no age statement. It is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and on the label it does say aged at least 4 years. So
because it's bottled in bond,
straight
right?
Means right.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, it is. So it was a minimum of 4. The Heaven Hill was a minimum of 6. That did everything I wanted it to do. That was
a load of fun, and
really tickety boo.
I wouldn't necessarily say. I mean, I definitely would not say the Evan Williams directly replaces the 6-year-old Heaven Hill. However, from a price point standpoint, not so bad. From an ABV standpoint, not so bad. Is it just as enjoyable? It is an enjoyable little whiskey. All right, you can't argue with it. So there you go. Good bargain, good whiskey. Enjoy.
Good recommendation.
Yeah, good recommendation. So thank you, Bruce Russell. Between the conversation we had with Mo and the tasting we just had, this was awesome. I love what we've got going on for season 6, and there's so much more to be revealing, including, Jason, we got an email recently from our good friend Ollie Chilton, which is so nice. Like, I love it when non-industry listeners write in, but when industry listeners write in, it gets real exciting. However, we've got to close the episode because it's been gone on a while. So we've got this.
We've had our fun.
We've got the email from Ollie, which we will bring up in next episode. We promise you, Ollie, we will bring it up. And should you, the listener, want to send in an email, we hope you do. We try to get to as many emails as possible. Reach out to us, questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com, info@singlecasknation.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram, all of that stuff. Gosh, I just don't want to name them all out, Jason. Like, we have all the handles, and I'm just like, fucking this and at that, and, you know?
Yep, look under a rock. We might be there also.
Oh, right next to the salamanders that you find under the rock.
And the diamonds. You always find diamonds under rocks.
Always.
Always just lift a rock. There's a diamond there.
That's how I found you, Jason.
Well, you certainly put me under enough pressure, so.
Jason, this has been a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Forever and always, plus or minus sandwiches.
And until next time, Jason, unless you have anything to say, I'd like to bid you adieu, as well as our listeners adieu and adieu.
Couldn't do it without the listeners. Couldn't do it without you. Couldn't do it without Mo. So, cheers to you all. Until the next time.
Until then.
Two chins.
2 chins. In years past, we've had a regular question that we would ask of everyone, but Jason's been changing it up in the bedroom lately. And I didn't know, just finding different rabbit holes. You never know what happens, right? Just the tip jar. Anyway,
Heyo!
Who's Jar?
Jar Jar Binks. Just the tip Jar Jar Binks.